Welcome to the Fundamental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Saladino. This podcast is the result of my relentless search to understand and correct the roots of chronic disease and illness. In this podcast, I will share with you everything I have learned about how to live the most healthy and radical life possible. Thanks for joining me on this journey. What is up, you guys? Welcome to the Fundamental Health Podcast. I am so stoked that you are here for me for this episode. It is a good one. I'm also super stoked to let you know that Beef Organs is back in stock at heartandsoil.co. And if you need more nose-to-tail nutrition from grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised cows living in the wilds of New Zealand, the beautiful rolling pastures of New Zealand, we are the place to do that. You can check us out at heartandsoil.co. My two favorite supplements recently are Lifeblood, which is blood extract. It's actual whole blood, not an extract, and liver and spleen. That is a powerful supplement. And Heart of the Warrior, which is my two favorite organs, liver and heart. But we've got Beef Organs back in stock, and we will have Histamine and Immune in stock this week as well. So we'll have a full store. Super exciting. Check us out, heartandsoil.co. If you have questions about which supplement might be right for you, you can always email me, Dr. Paul, drpaul at heartandsoil.co. This is how we help you reclaim your ancestral birthright to radical health, something I believe we are all born with, the ability, the birthright to be optimal, to kick a whole lot of ass. And I think a huge part of that is getting the organs in your diet. You can always be the alpha in your tribe because you'll always have the organs. If you listen to the podcast I did with Joe Rogan, we talked about the fact that throughout many cultures and even other species, the alpha in the tribe gets the organs first. So become the alpha. Optimize yourself. Check us out, heartandsoil.co. My guest on this week's podcast is Sean O'Mara, a traditionally trained medical doctor who has spent the last decade plus looking at thousands of magnetic resonance images of people's abdomens and brains. MRI images can show us the amount of visceral fat. That's the amount of fat within your belly, in the peritoneum, much more accurately than a DEXA or a CT scan. And he's noticed some pretty amazing things. If you saw my Instagram this week, you know that there was a recent study that correlated the amount of visceral fat in the belly with worse COVID outcomes. That is, more visceral fat, which equates to more metabolic dysfunction, correlated with worse COVID outcomes. Imagine that. Where have I heard that before? Oh, wait, that's the kind of stuff we've been talking about for the last year. So really interesting podcast. There are a lot of images associated with this podcast. You may want to go to YouTube for at least part of it. The video is also available at heartandsoil.co. But you can see in these videos the way that visceral fat shrinks when people transition to a diet akin to a animal-based diet with essentially no seed oils and no refined grain-based carbohydrates. It shrinks immediately. How cool is that? How cool is that, you guys? It's fascinating images. You'll also see images that suggest that atherosclerosis, the formation of plaque in the arteries of the brain, can be reversed with this type of eating. It's really the holy grail of everything we're talking about. Can we reverse atherosclerosis? Can we reverse the process of diabetes? You bet we can. And it's really not that complicated. It's really as simple as eating in an ancestral way, which is what I am all about. Eating a species-appropriate human diet, which includes meat and organs. Check us out at Heart and Soil if you need desiccated organs, and the least toxic plant foods, and eliminates the most toxic plant foods, which are really not evolutionarily consistent for humans, including refined grains and seed oils. So this is a good one. Enjoy this podcast, you guys. Dr. Sean O'Mara, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's great to have you.
Yeah, good to be with you, Paul, and your audience.
You know, when I was in medical school, I always felt like the most impactful lectures started out with cases and case studies. And so there are some really impactful case studies that you're going to share with us today. So I want to start the podcast with some of these case studies. Now, I'll let the listeners know that this podcast is going to be very visual. Sean is a physician in Minneapolis, right?
That's right, Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, doing MRIs on people and looking at their visceral fat. We're going to look at arteries in the brain. And what we're going to be able to show, or what Sean can show, is reversal of atherosclerosis in the brain with dietary intervention, which is that's really the holy grail of what we're all trying to do. And so these images are so powerful. So if you guys are listening to this on the podcast, I would encourage you to go to heartandsoil.co and watch the video, or go to YouTube and watch the video if you want to see these images of reversal. But let's start with some of these cases, Sean, that you've seen. And let's start with the visceral fat reversal case, because this one's pretty striking.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and pull that up, and let me just go ahead and screen share it so that everybody else can catch up. And let me know when that pops up for you so we can chat about that.
Okay, looks good.
Okay, so do you see my cursor, Paul? Does screen share?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm really glad that you're encouraging your audience to go and to Heart and Soil and look at these images, because I think as a physician, whose passion is to get as many people healthy as I possibly can, that I think about it when I wake up in the morning, and I'm thinking about it when I'm going to bed at night, that I think it's senses more than numbers and more than data that is most useful to getting people optimally healthy. If you just want to get a little bit healthy, you could probably do numbers. Like, if you want to get a little bit healthy, lose a little weight, track your weight that way. But if you want to become optimally healthy, and I think we are wired that way because we're hunter-gatherers, then you use your senses, because for millions of years, I think was what our wiring was just our senses, whether we were healthier, we appeared better, and we were performing better. So visceral fat, I think it's nice to talk about a number, but it's much more impactful to take a look at your visceral fat. So in this image here, this gentleman came in with 68. Week 0 means that's when he first got started on this particular intervention. And this is a cross section through his abdomen. So for the benefit of the audience, this is where the belly button is. And these dark structures down here are the muscles in your back. These larger yellow areas down here are what called your fat pads or your love handles, just so people can reference it. And what is different about this particular image is that we have painted the stuff in the middle here, kind of a reddish pinkish color, and that's your visceral fat. And that's what we're going to be talking about here. And the stuff on the outside is your subcutaneous fat. So this particular study is a series of MRI studies where this guy agreed to do just one thing, and that's all he wanted to do. We wanted him to exercise, but he just wanted to do one thing. He was 68. He was owner of a large company, and he ran that, and he just didn't want to do exercise. So he cut out processed carbs, cut out carbohydrates. Basically, he just ate meat and vegetables in whole form. And in a period of 2 weeks, you can see that this distance from here to here is his diameter of his abdomen. It became smaller, and the amount of redness is smaller in the second image than the first. So in 2 weeks, this guy shrunk his visceral fat that much. Now, with the benefit of an MRI and software, you can quantify, and we did here, how much visceral fat he had, 5.6 pounds. And the next image, in 2 weeks, he was down to 4.2. So he lost 1.4 pounds, basically 1.5 pounds of visceral fat. But what's also interesting is you can see loss, but you can also see a gain. So week 2 to week 5, this guy came back, had his repeat scan, and not unlike a lot of people, he got lulled into complacency. He says, "Oh, I got this. I just cut out carbs, and I'll bring in a little bit more, some comfort foods. I could, eat a lot." There was chips and pizza, if I remember correctly. He decided to eat a little bit more, and the computer caught it. So he put on more visceral fat, a little bit, almost about 0.5 pound, and his diameter got a little bit bigger. But because he was caught, and we showed him how that visceral fat increased from the poor choices he made, he got really serious. Also, over the next preceding weeks and the following scans, he became increasingly more disciplined and didn't cheat anymore. And he had a dramatic reduction from over 5.5 pounds down to 1.8 pounds. So that's about a 68% reduction in his visceral fat, if I remember the math correctly. But also interesting is in this first image, you see that fat streak in his muscle. That's the transverse and oblique muscle there, portion of it. On that first scan, there's that thick deposition of fat within the musculature, their intramuscular fat, and it's resolved here over a period of time. So his muscles move better. When you don't have that deposition of that inflammatory fat within your muscle and less visceral fat, that's why you perform better. So it's a great series, and I share this series a lot with my clients to help them understand the profound importance of how you eat, even more than exercise, because this guy, again, did not exercise 1 minute. So let your audience be impacted visually. We all have heard that, but we need to see it through our senses. How much dietary choices, how we eat, plays a role in our health more than exercise. I really believe that. Now, exercise is absolutely key. I get my clients to exercise, but if I get you exercise all you want, but if you're not making healthy choices about what you eat, you are not going to become optimally healthy and as healthy as you need to be.
I love it, Sean. This is such a cool series of images. And you have so many amazing images, which is why I'm so excited for this podcast. But if you guys are listening to this, you really need to go look at these images. I'll try to describe them for you. But as Sean has said, this is an image of someone basically lying on a table. You're looking at them from their feet, and we've taken a magician's slicing blade and cut them in half. And obviously not literally, but with an MRI, which is a magnetic resonance imaging machine. And we're looking at the inside of their belly from their feet. And we can see this visceral fat, which is within the peritoneum. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, where the anatomy is. But you can see in this 35-week series, this person has gone from 5.6 pounds of visceral fat to 1.8 pounds of visceral fat within his abdomen with only dietary change. And I want to dig into a little bit of the dietary change because it's a fascinating dietary change, but only dietary change. The mainstream idea here, the mainstream sort of preaching is eat less, move more. If you are fat, you are not exercising enough. And that is complete hogwash. And that's what Sean and I are both saying here, that you can lose weight without exercising. We both agree that exercise is critical. We're going to talk about sprinting today and our shared love of sprinting, but dietary change is foundational for humans. And I've had Kirk Parsley on my podcast. I think that he would suggest that sleep is foundational, but my goodness, if you can sleep well and change your diet, you can radically affect your overall metabolic health. And if you look at these images, you'll see some might say, well, in 35 weeks, he went from 5.6 pounds of visceral fat to 1.8 pounds of visceral fat. That's not a huge weight loss, but that's not correct, because do you know how much weight this guy lost overall, Sean?
We did, but I forget now because I don't have it in front of me. And actually, to the point, I don't really care. Weight loss is not that critically important. It's. I know a lot of other people follow it, but I just don't have my clients measuring it. When the techs measure it, I don't even look at it. I look at what is a much purer signal to noise ratio, what really is helpful. And so rather than losing weight, I get my clients to lose visceral fat, that which is destructive, because it has a lot more impact. I mean, you could lose a lot of subcutaneous fat, but visually, let's talk about, see that image here that I got my cursor, the last one. This guy now looks more like a collegiate athlete than he does a 68-year-old blobby guy up here when he first came in. This guy, look, that's a six-pack. He didn't get that from exercising. He got that from exercising discipline and what he ate. So that improved his whole shape. So, it's really important, those senses. And if you do the right things, you make healthy choices in your diet, your body reveals it. And it's a lot more than just the weight loss. So unfortunately, I can't tell you. I guess it would be kind of interesting to be able to say. But honestly, I'm trying to think right now. Yeah, I almost never even track weight in any of my clients. They tell me, oh, Dr. Amira, I haven't called me Sean. Sean, I've lost 40 pounds this this month, 30 pounds this month. I mean, yeah, that's great. But what I really like to see is this loss of visceral fat because of its profound benefit, improving. And maybe we should just, say, to the audience, if you have never heard about visceral fat or you haven't read about it, and a lot of people haven't, get educated about it, read about it, and see its association with chronic disease. So many different forms of chronic disease, arthritis, degenerative joint disease, and the big ones, heart attacks and strokes through its connection to atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which we're going to get into, I hope, in this podcast, and to be able to make believers in your audience, again, about the importance of how you eat and the role of nutrition.
Yeah, it's just incredible. My point was just that a weight loss of almost 4 pounds of visceral fat is an indicator of a profound improvement in overall metabolic health, because this fat that's within the peritoneum, it's not the fat that you can pinch on your belly. This is not subcutaneous fat. If you guys are seeing these images, you can see that they've colored the subcutaneous fat yellow and the visceral fat pink. And these fats are very different. They're very different indicators in humans. If you have lots of visceral fat, that is essentially pathonomic, is what we would call it in medical school. That is essentially a pure, direct indicator of underlying metabolic unhealth, metabolic dysfunction, and or insulin resistance is another word we could use. If you had looked at this guy's labs, like you'd said in the beginning of this podcast, if you really want to get healthy, you want to see visual changes. If we were looking at this guy's labs, I bet that we could see his fasting insulin drop profoundly over these 35 weeks. I bet his postprandial glucose and his glucose pattern on something like a continuous glucose monitor would change profoundly in 35 weeks. I bet his HSCRP, his inflammatory markers, went down a significant amount. But all those are kind of esoteric markers that doctors play around with. This is clear, in-your-face knowledge that, hey, his subcutaneous fat went down, but his visceral fat, the fat that you guys can't see that's within your abdomen, you can still see it because somebody can have, kind of a pot belly without a whole lot of subcutaneous fat. That's the fat that is just the key indicator. That's the fat that's really going to tell you how metabolically healthy you are, which is why these MRI scans are so incredible. So this one's so striking. Before we move on from this one, Sean, let's just talk about his diet a little bit, because it was so interesting to me when I saw this, that between weeks 2 and 5, he started eating chips and pizza again, right? And I thought, so interesting. So here he's getting seed oils and refined carbohydrates. Boom, his visceral fat comes back. And over this time period, this 35 weeks, he really did 2 big changes, didn't he? He eliminated processed carbs, and in the process of doing that, he eliminated seed oils. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. I completely agree with that. I mean, the big emphasis was eliminating the processed foods where you see those harmful, destructive seed oils. And let me just give you a shout out, man. Way to go to talk about these things, because they have such a deleterious effect on your health together, especially with carbohydrates. And, if I could get your audience or anybody to do just one thing, I would just get them to cut out processed foods. Just eliminating processed foods will have this profound effect on eliminating that visceral fat. So you've done a great job, and that's exactly what this guy did. And we see it time and time again. That's what we work on with our clients to undergo MRI scans to help analyze what's going on and track their improvements to get them absolutely off processed foods. If they're not going to get off processed foods, I won't even work with them, because I'm a researcher. I don't have time. I have lots of diseased people that I can follow. I'm looking for people that really want to become optimally healthy. And if you're eating seed oils and processed foods, you're never going to get there. Not to the level of health that you're fully capable of, that you can't even imagine. We're just really a super healthy, super exciting state that I hope eventually many, many more people start to comprehend and start attaining.
And I think it's a state that everyone has a birthright to. I think we all can be profoundly healthy if we just find this such a simple way of eating. This is the species appropriate human diet. And so my audience has heard about seed oils a ton. I just want to highlight a few things and then we'll move on to the next case. In this case, like, do you think all carbohydrates are bad for humans, or do you think it's mostly the processed carbohydrates? Because from my perspective, I really believe that evolutionarily humans were eating fruit and carbohydrates seasonally, maybe occasional tubers, but mostly fruit, sweet and non-sweet fruit. And personally, what I've seen is that when I reincorporated moderate amounts of carbohydrates, not massive amounts of non-processed carbohydrates. This morning I had 6 dates, for instance. Sometimes I'll have a tablespoon or 2 of honey, like the Hadza, and my insulin markers didn't change at all. Now, granted, I never did an MRI, but my weight didn't change. I don't think my visceral fat increased. I'm really fascinated by this difference, this potential difference, but I want to get your opinion. I want you to weigh in here as well, between a processed carbohydrate and something that I might term or think of as an ancestrally consistent carbohydrate. Do you think there's a difference there? Or from your perspective, are they all problematic for humans?
I absolutely think there's a difference. And I agree with you that our ancestors of old that were superhumans, we haven't even scratched the surface of just the extraordinary difference that our older ancestors enjoyed over us. But I think absolutely that their diet would have contained more whole foods to include natural carbohydrates and the absence of processed carbohydrates. And to your point, that's what we see as the people that we have taken a look at. And now I wish I'd grabbed some of those studies. The people that try eating processed foods, they just put on visceral fat. And those that will eat a carbohydrate in a more natural form, such as fruits and berries, do not put on the same degree. Now, calories and the content of carbohydrates could play a role in that. But I think, honestly, it's the form of those carbohydrates. And secondly, the contribution, and hopefully we'll get into this, of the microbiome. So, your microbiome sets your capacity for your metabolism and contributes to how your body is going to be responding to those carbohydrates. But we've done MRI series where people have gone and eaten rice over the weekend, and we can rescan them from Friday to Monday and show them the increase in visceral fat. So and cheating over processed with other processed foods. So absolutely. I think your audience probably, I have noticed it. I have an identical twin brother. He's noticed it, that if you, eat incorrectly, your stomach will grow and you should be able to pick up that, hey, that was not good. And that's in short order, you can put on, as this guy did, and increased his visceral fat. So yeah, it's a big difference. I agree with you, Paul, completely, that the form of these carbohydrates. And also, I'll just share with you too, I'm really big on the senses. I haven't heard anybody else say this, maybe it's out there, but when you see somebody with a 6-pack, I think they're not in an optimal state. I think that they're probably living too close to the edge, and so I think we're meant to have probably a thin layer of subcutaneous fat. And I would see this in the thousands of patients that I would do exams on. And I've noticed people that had 6-packs, I got kind of used to seeing these super kind of fit athletes with these 6-packs. And then I get a super fit athlete with just a thin layer of subcutaneous fat, and my eyes and my brain would look at that and say, that's healthy. Over the really thin zero subcutaneous fat. And we, I have some MRIs that show that kind of paucity of fat. But I think actually there is a value to having some subcutaneous fat, and it's established by your lifestyle, how you live, the choices you eat, that help make up just exactly how you should look, how you should be performing, and your overall level of health.
I think that's an interesting point, because if you look at these guys in bodybuilding, for instance, they end up with 4%, 5% body fat, and they have essentially no subcutaneous fat, and they look great on stage. but they are a hormonal nightmare. So I think that there is a point at which the subcutaneous fat can dip too low. I haven't checked mine with like really, really accurate levels of fat. I would say I'm somewhere around 9 or 10% body fat. And you can see my abs. I definitely have a six pack, but I'm not like 4% body fat. And I know that my hormones are good. And I know that if I completely cut out all the fat in my diet and just ate lean meat and didn't do like a little bit more fat in my meat, that I could get down to 6 or 5% body fat. But I know that at some level my hormones would tank. And so I agree with you. I think that seeing a six pack is good, but there's a point at which the six pack and the total body fat becomes too low for both men and women, and the hormones suffer. And I think that's a point that's well taken, that you don't need to get down to 5% body fat, guys, but you do want to get, lean. The other point that I want to make before we move on from this scan, and then I want to show people the atherosclerosis progression, is this question for you. Sean, this guy didn't cut out meat, right? Because the vegans, the plant-based guys, would say that meat causes insulin resistance and diabetes. This guy is eating meat. And, I've heard you say this, but I'll ask you this question. Have you ever seen a vegan with visceral fat in them?
I have. And what you won't see on the internet is the vegan proponents, especially our vegan physician counterparts. And I'd love to have better relationships with them, but boy, there's some contention. They don't put up their visceral fat scans, and so
right?
It's just not something that they're, I think, using is in their tool to take a look at their visceral fat. They're fond of touting cholesterol by eating their low non-fat diet and eating lots of carbs and vegetation. But to answer your question, we've had vegans come in. I've had vegans come in that I remember one encounter. I wish I had a scan up here to pull it up. I think it's in my Instagram account if you wanted to, anybody wants to take a look at that. But in that particular encounter, he walked in and I said, we're going to measure your visceral fat and quantify this. And then you can see how your visceral fat will either increase or decrease depending on how you eat. And he looked at me, he's a little bit of all the guys, says, oh, well, you're not going to see any visceral fat in me. I have been a vegan for 27 years. And so this guy actually came in, got his visceral fat, and he was loaded. He had, if I remember correctly, in excess, he had, I think, more than this guy. And he was, a thin guy. He was a tofu, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, filled with visceral fat. So it immediately changed him. He saw that, and he went to eating meat. Can you imagine? 27 years, gets an MRI scan and decides to eat meat. So yeah, vegans I haven't seen a long-term older vegan ever that does not have a elevated amount of visceral fat when they come in. They're almost always topis, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And they don't look good. They may not have a lot of, they may have a paucity of subcutaneous fat. Sometimes they have a lot depending on their lifestyle too, but they clearly have a lot of visceral fat. So, and they just, there's a lot of correlation to faces. I can see, we'll get maybe some photographs. I can see when they walk in that they're going to have elevated amounts of visceral fat just by looking at their face, because after scanning thousands of people and seeing visceral fat, I saw it in their face before they walked in, the level of inflammation. And, for your audience, they just to have a little fun, they can, go to images of a bikini clad women and look at their abdomens without looking at their faces. And you can do a little experiment, say which abdomen looks healthier to me. If you're a member of the opposite sex and you're attracted to a female, you're attracted to that female because of their level of health. That's nature telling you to, select that's a healthy person, a potential healthy mate. So when you look at those abdomens, they correlate with the faces. It's a fascinating process. I've never heard anybody else talk about that, but the healthier an abdomen looks, the more you see that in the face. And with female bodybuilders, guys, are attracted to women. we're not attracted to rail thin, muscular types with no subcutaneous fat. It's that little layer of fat that again looks a little more attracted to us. And in vegans, they have a lot of inflammation that will show in their face, and we have some photographs that we'll probably get into showing that. But again, yeah, visceral fat is elevated, unfortunately, in the vegans. And if you're a vegan, get your MRI scan of visceral fat. I recommend an MRI over a DEXA scan, because a DEXA scan gives you a longitudinal view instead of a cross section. So that cross section in this image, that first one, allows you to better visualize that visceral fat than the visualization that's able to be seen in a DEXA scan. A DEXA scan really gives you more of a number than actually allows you to image your visceral fat. A CT scan, Paul, also gives you a cross section. And, think back, as a physician, how many CT scans we saw as med students and as residents, and they're all over the internet, but nobody comments on visceral fat. The doctors and the radiologists looking at this, nobody comments. So a big shout out to the radio audience. If you've ever had a CT scan, if you ever had an MRI scan of your abdomen, get that image, go back to your doctor and say, tell me, I want to see my visceral fat, and see what it was like at that time, and consider getting repeated so you can see where you are today as a reflection and a measurement of your lifestyle intervening since that time. So yeah, I think this is a very important biomarker, visceral fat, to track, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on board your show and to be able to talk and highlight this really important biomarker.
Oh, it's so cool, Sean. I want to show something that'll be a little bit tongue in cheek for people. I'll do a screen share here just to show people the difference. We posted this on my social media. Here is me. So there's me. And this is a well-known plant-based physician who will go nameless. And I think that if you looked at his face, you could probably see some inflammation. There's quite a bit of ashen variety in his skin. He has essentially no neck. And there's got to be visceral fat in here. I wish this guy would go into your MRI scan. So I'll just leave that there for the audience to think about.
Leave it up. That's a great image. So, his face, looks inflamed. And looking at those two things, here's what I challenge your audience. And if somebody's brand new, just turn it into to your audience for the first time and following. We form opinions about who we want to associate with and who we want to have as our leaders, hunters, and gatherers, and the alpha female, the alpha male, by their appearance and how they perform. And if you look at those faces and you look at that body habitus, you can tell who's going to be performing better, who looks better. And what I have noticed across the board with clients who get serious about eliminating visceral fat, improving their diet, is their appearance improves and their capacity for functioning, their functional performance across the board performs as considerably. Like I can pick up new sports shockingly. Like my young son didn't want to teach me lacrosse because he says everybody drops a ball and it's super frustrating trying to teach them. I'm 57 today, but this happening when I was 55. He's teaching me lacrosse. First time ever, half hour back and forth throwing it. I dropped the ball like 3 times. 3 times. It was remarkable how fast, when you really get healthy, how well you perform. So it's your functional performance and your appearance, I think, is more important than data like numeric data, like cholesterol and labs, because for millions of years, that's all we followed was appearance and functional performance. Who could lead the clan the best in the hunt is what really established excellence. So it's all senses and way more important than looking at a particular number.
It's funny. I've put it out there on Twitter a couple of times that anyone who wanted to debate me had to show up with their VAT, their visceral adipose tissue levels, and none of the vegans would do it because I knew that it would crush them, right? And then of course people came back and said that's fat shaming, and I said that's bullshit. It's not fat shaming. If you are full of visceral fat, why do we care what you're saying? Because you're either not doing the diet you're advocating for, or the diet you're advocating for doesn't work. So that's not fat shaming. I stand behind that. Anyone who's going to debate me needs to show up with their visceral adipose tissue. And if their visceral adipose tissue is more than mine, we're going to put that as a banner at the top of the debate, that whatever this guy says, just take it in the context of the fact that his visceral adipose tissue is more than mine. And I guarantee you there's no vegan that's going to beat me in visceral adipose tissue. We'll wait and see. But I can, like, none of those guys have ever stepped up to the plate. And even if a non-vegan, even somebody else that wanted to debate me, I would always say, show me your visceral adipose tissue. I love it. This podcast is renewing my vigor to say, I'm not going to go into any debate unless somebody else shows me their visceral adipose tissue. And I love that you, as you point out, staunch vegans full of visceral adipose tissue. It's not the cure. In fact, it's going to cause problems. I just want to share this article to really drive home for people the importance of visceral adipose tissue. This is one of my favorite articles. I'm not sure if you've seen this one, Sean, but I'm sure you know of this condition. So familial lipodystrophy, Dunnington familial lipodystrophy, is a monogenic form of insulin resistance. There's one gene that's mutated called LMNA. And I've talked about this on multiple podcasts in the past, but when people have a polymorphism, sort of a single gene mutation in LMNA, this is very rare, they get insulin resistant, but it's one gene. And people with lipodystrophy, this Dunnington type familial partial lipodystrophy, get essentially, they cannot store fat in their subcutaneous tissue. So they have a very low personal fat threshold. Well, where does all the fat go? It goes straight to the visceral adipose tissue, straight to the visceral adipose. So these people have we say it's like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle abdomen. They have like a tortoiseshell abdomen. They have a six-pack, but they have a protuberant abdomen because their visceral adipose tissue is big and pushing out. And what do they get? They get horrible insulin resistance, and they get premature atherosclerosis. So if anyone doubts the relevance or the importance of visceral adipose tissue as an indicator and potentially as a source of unique inflammation and inflammatory cytokines, this model of familial partial lipodystrophy, Dunnington type, with a single gene mutation that causes premature atherosclerosis is fascinating. And the last thing I'll add here is these people do not have elevated LDL. Dunnington type familial partial lipodystrophy patients do not have elevated LDL, but they have horrible insulin resistance. They're full of visceral adipose tissue, and they get atherosclerosis very quickly. So that is a really cool indication in my mind of the importance of visceral adipose.
Super interesting study. I have not read that, but I agree. What an awesome model to enlighten your audience and to enlighten people about the contribution of visceral fat and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And bummer gene, man, to have acquired. And I think back as a researcher, how these gene mutations occurred. And I got, every time I see these really bad ones, I think it's probably, a confounding of a lot of different things, contributions. But I think absolutely connected that was some really bad lifestyle choices in our ancestors. And so, another challenge for your audience, if you can't get healthy for yourself, do it for your children and your future offspring, because of the role that your lifestyle plays genetically with future generations. So it's so important to live healthy and make the right choices to really improve the quality of your life, but also to improve the quality of your future generations.
That's such an important point. Every time I see this and I think genetically, when someone is born and they have an issue, I think, I wonder if we could have changed that by fixing the parents. So all you potential parents out there, think about this, that the way you eat will affect your life, but also the generations beyond you. Okay, so let's move on to the next images, this video you have of essentially reversal of atherosclerosis in the brain. So perhaps the holy grail for so many people is Will your diet reverse atherosclerosis? Will your diet reverse plaque progression in the arteries? Now, we often think about this in the arteries of the heart, but Sean has some really incredible stuff that we're going to look at in the arteries of the brain, which are essentially built the same way. And if you have atherosclerosis in your brain, you're going to have atherosclerosis in your heart. Sean, before you do this one, I just want to show one thing. So I'm going to pause you there. Okay. I want to show this for people, which is the actual circle of Willis anatomy. So what we're going to be looking at here is the brain, and we're going to be looking at the underside of the brain. Like you can see in this picture, there are arteries that come up from the brainstem, and there's a basilar artery, there's posterior communicating arteries, there's a posterior cerebellar artery, there's an anterior communicating artery, there are internal carotids, and middle cerebral arteries and anterior cerebral arteries. So this is the circle of Willis, and this is the bottom of your brain, guys. You can see this artery is coming up from the brainstem, the cerebellum, the circle of Willis, and this is how the brain is getting supplied with blood. So what we're going to look at here from Sean is a video of an angiogram where somebody's going to inject dye into these arteries, and we're going to see that the dye isn't going to be flowing where there's an atherosclerotic plaque that is occluding flow. So with that as a baseline for the anatomy you guys are going to see, why don't you walk us through this one, Sean?
Yeah, sure. So what I'll say right away, first of all, everybody thinks this is angiographic because you can see that it's not. Okay. What's so interesting is this is a non-con, I-, meaning no contrast was used to obtain this. So what we're looking at, how this is possible, is we're simply looking at the difference between blood and plaque and brain parenchyma. So those three substances have differences magnetically on an MRI, and that's why I like an MRI. It doesn't use radiation, but allows you to see the differences in tissue. So what we're measuring is the presence of disease, which blocks blood flow, so we don't see it. The blood flow in these images I'm going to show you are nice white. And when you see lack of blood flow or compromised blood flow, it becomes darker, so there's not as much light. So you can get this by an MRI, and you don't have to use contrast. A lot of people are nervous about contrast. This was just a very low resolution scanner. So this is pretty easy to acquire if you could just get a center to do this and a doctor understand. I show this to doctors. They get super confused as they're like, wow, why aren't we doing this? And they just don't have any experience. So this is the image, and these are the carotid arteries coming up. And first of all, see the dark down here?
Go ahead, share your screen there, Sean.
Okay, so let me push share screen, application, click on that, share. Is it working now?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, so what you're seeing is the white coming up to the carotid artery, blocking a name there. But see the darkness there? That's some plaque formation from the turbulence. The carotid comes whipping up, and you can see that darkness right there. And then on the side, a little bit here. So, and then what you have is a little bit on this other side too, in the distal sessions segments. You can see that a little bit of clogging. But what's really interesting is we turn this image around and see it in all views. And if you follow this out a little bit further out on this left side, you can see the blood flow is great until right there it becomes occluded. There's a lack of blood flow because of a plaque in there. And so we can see that the blood isn't flowing through there. We don't know if it's a hard plaque like calcified or if it's a soft plaque, but it's in all views when we rotate it up and down. So we can basically move this in all three different dimensions. And that plaque, that blockage persists, and we can see that. So I have to block the view because I got some other names that when I change the image, other patients' names come in, so I don't violate HIPAA. So what we're going to see now is we're going to repeat this study. That's my partner's name. That's not the patient's name. But we're going to repeat this study now 9 months later after the guy's improved his lifestyle. And when we repeat the study 9 months later, we can see that plaque filled in. And the plaque is no longer there. Blood has replaced that plaque. And so the ASCVD, atherosclerotic cardiovascular plaques that were there have resolved. and his other arteries on this side also improved as well too. So we've seen this probably a couple dozen times, and not as apparent though. I mean, this was a big plaque, and it opened up very nicely. So, but yeah, you can go and get an MRI scan if you're somebody in your 40s and 50s and 60s, and particularly if you've had metabolic lack of metabolic health for a period of time or a substantial period of time. The more you have had metabolic poor metabolic health, the more likely you are to have disease. You can get this measured, improve your lifestyle, and actually see the reversal of disease, and use an MRI and biomarkers for the purposes of reversing disease, to track that instead of treating it, which is how conventional healthcare normally operates. We try to look at things to make money off of. And this one, your strategies are just improving your diet, doing high intensity exercise, getting sunshine, optimizing your vitamin D, getting sleep, decreasing your stress, doing resilient exercises. These are a number of different protocols and strategies that we gave this gentleman to reverse his large lesion in his brain. So yeah, super excited to be able to share this. This is the first time it's been shared on a podcast, by the way, Paul.
Wow.
So your audience is the first one to ever see this, and I'm super excited to be able to introduce people to this new way of trying to look at former biomarkers that were used conventionally to treat disease and make money, and now we should be looking at these to capture what's wrong with people and tell them to improve their lifestyle and make better lifestyle choices. Not make money off those lifestyle choices, just let them go and do it, and they come back and see that. So your audience, it's hard. People all over the country follow me, and we just never been able to get a center to do this yet. But if they come to Minneapolis, I can send them to a place where these images are done, and both visceral fat scan could be done, and the cerebral artery scan could be done if you're interested in having these studies done. And I think you should. Recently I sent a doctor, a general surgeon, who had to have surgery, and he was scared before he went to surgery. They wanted to have angiography of his heart to make sure he's healthy. So he went in and had a cardiac workup. And they told him he was completely healthy and not to worry. He had his surgery, and 1 month after he had his surgery, he had a massive heart attack. And so he came to see me. I bumped into him in an airport down in Florida. Turns out he lived in Minneapolis. I got him to come right up and get scanned. Of course, he was filled with a huge amount of visceral fat. And I did a posting on him because he's kind of a good story to talk about. But yeah, it's visceral fat. It correlates so well to atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And I think the cerebral arteries are great because there's not dynamic motion, so we can capture good imagery of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And for the sake of your audience, we got interested in brain arteries because our clients were asking us in our studies that as they got rid of visceral fat, they literally asking us, Paul, does visceral fat, when you get rid of it, make you smarter? Because my memory is better, and I do my work faster and better, and I have less errors in my work. And we couldn't answer as well. We'll start taking a look at the brain. So we were scanning the brain to see if something was changing in the brain. And what it was is these arteries, the disease process in the arteries were opening up. So it's a really great study to be able to show people.
It's so striking. And you put that guy on a vegan diet, right? That's how he reversed his atherosclerosis in his brain, right? No, I'm joking. So what dietary modifications did he do? Similar to the first guy, right? Avoiding processed carbohydrates, seed oils, that kind of thing, or what?
Exactly. Yeah, this guy went on a low carb, high fat, ketogenic diet. At this time, we weren't making recommendations to eat a carnivore or carnivore-ish diet. So he ate a lot of meat, but it really was 3 years ago. And I myself hadn't gone carnivore at that time. So it was a low carb, high fat, ketogenic diet that I think the majority of physicians in our particular space looking at trying to get people healthy are now starting to embrace and moving away from the fear of fat that we formerly had instilled in us when we went to medical school.
So maybe this is a good time to talk about your story, because I know you've got some striking pictures of yourself that we can share. Now that you've kind of shown people these striking case studies, why don't you talk about how you got interested in this, your background a little bit, and your own story of personal transformation, Sean? I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just show my own picture here formally when click on, make sure that this screen share comes up and it shares. Boom. So yeah, this is a picture of me formerly. Does it show up okay?
It does. Yeah, I see it.
Okay. So I had a big gut, and my face doesn't show up there, but I had a big puffy face, and then this is me today. So my face has changed, and my gut has changed, and I've got a lot more definition. I had more lunch lady arms than I did here. And what got me to change was a patient. I was a conventional trained MD, terrified of fat. I worked in the hospital emergency room, drinking a gallon of skim milk with chocolate powder in it, and I thought that's how I'm going to lose weight. And I kept gaining more and more weight. And this patient in the hospital, I finally met a patient, and we were talking, and he was extremely healthy. And he told me just one fact. He looked healthy. I could tell he was a great athlete, but he told me something that persuaded me. And what he told me that allowed me to make this change was, he told me Sergey Brin, the founder and owner of Google, went low carb, high fat. At that time, it was the paleo diet, because Google was analyzing how people spent time on the internet, and they looked at diets. And if you want to know what's important to a person, and you would understand this by your professional training, look at where they spend their time, how they spend their time, and how they spend their money, and it will give you an indication of what's important to that person's life. And what they found was it was a low carb, high fat diet that the majority of people who will spend more time reading about on the internet, that's how they track it, than Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers, the Mediterranean diet, South Beach, all these other diets. It was a low carb, then high fat paleo diet that was really capturing people. And the second interesting thing that really compelled me was they saw the same thing started to happen in these people's closest friends and family members. So that's called endorsement. So if you really like something, you endorse it to other people, and then they started doing the same thing. So that doesn't happen to other diets. It persuaded Google and the executives there that they should be eating a low carb, high fat diet, and it's really taken off since that time. And it's interesting to me that paleo went to even lower carbs with keto, and then even lower carbs still with carnivore. And so I followed suit, and this is me, eating carnivore. Or carnivore-ish diet, because I do eat vegetables, but I only eat fermented vegetables. So that's my story, and that's my my change, and I'm sticking with that story. I mean, it was a great thing to go through, and I'm so happy that I did that. But what's interesting, the last point I'll make about that story is when I saw the benefit doing it, just made so much sense. I immediately emailed all of my physician friends, right? I fully expected them to go on a low carb, high fat diet, and none of them did. I mean, I was astounded. I was like, how come they're not doing that? And so my best friend, it took him years. It took him about 10 years. But now he's finally low carb, high fat, and eating predominantly a carnivore diet. And I'll give him a shout out. at Morea Ortho, if you follow him on Twitter and Instagram, great guy. And he's really turned himself around. But yeah, it's some people get it, some people don't. But clearly, the low carb, high fat diet is getting our clients and the people that I work with the very best results.
And I love it. I completely agree with you. And I want to clarify something for people. The mainstream nutritional recommendations from the USDA, the government, are for 40 to 50+% of your diet to come from carbohydrates. And there is no way to get that many carbohydrates without stuffing yourself full of grains and other processed carbohydrates, and at the exclusion of more nutrient-dense meat and organs. So when Sean says low carb, really anything less than 40% of your calories per day from carbohydrates is considered to be low carb. I think for most people, the sweet spot is probably even a little lower, 20, 30%, 30, 20. For some people, it's even lower at 15% of your calories from carbohydrates. But you don't have to, from my perspective, and I'd love you to weigh in here, Sean, I don't think people need to go ketogenic all the time or zero carbohydrate to find benefits. I think the biggest benefit that I've seen in my practice and that I see, especially with what I'm now terming animal-based diets, it's kind of carnivore-ish, but I think animal-based is a better word. It's like a plant-based diet, except the complete opposite, and something that's way more evolutionarily consistent that actually works to improve people's health instead of destroying it like a plant-based diet. But just like a plant-based diet is mostly plants and maybe a few animal foods, an animal-based diet is mostly animal foods and a few of the least toxic plants. And so I think for most people, in my experience, being low carb, eating less than 40% of your calories as carbohydrates is definitely the way to go. Because I don't know how anyone could eat more than 40% of your calories as carbohydrates and still get all the nutrients you need in a day. Certainly you want to get meat and organs. That's why we do what we do at Heart and Soil. But I think for a lot of people, the sweet spot's around 15, 20, 25, 30% of your calories from carbohydrates. I do think for those people with full-blown diabetes, if I saw the guy that we looked at first with full-blown visceral fat, I would say, yeah, go lower carb. But what's been interesting for me is that as a metabolically healthy individual, you don't have to go zero carb keto. So I think I just want to clarify that for people so they don't get confused, and just see if you had any thoughts, see if you agree with that, let you weigh in on that sort of nuance around low carb, zero carb, keto, et cetera. I'll just add, and then I'll let you add your thoughts that for me, adding in a moderate amount of carbohydrates, 50 to 100 grams a day, was a significant improvement in my athletic performance. My muscle cramping went away, my palpitations went away, and my sleep got way better. I do think ketogenic, that is extremely low carb diets, can be beneficial for people, but that we should probably cycle them on that because of the issues that can develop with electrolytes. But that's just my perspective. So what do you think about all that?
Yeah, so I agree. What I think is probably ancestrally what we would have done is that we may have had days and maybe seasons where we even ate in excess of 40, the numeric value of 40 or a certain percentage of grams of carbohydrates, and then other times where we would have been lower. And so I think the flexibility to be able to use different macronutrients comes along with healthy, optimal lifestyle. But to kind of show you, is that image showing up there?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. So to kind of show you the difference, these people went predominantly low carb, so they weren't zero carb. But this is a colleague in the Army National Guard who was an Army medic, super intelligent, and he went a low carb, high fat. Just happened to be at a series of lectures. You didn't even go to listen. He came there to work because I was working with overweight soldiers. He was a little bit overweight, but look at the dramatic change. He took notes, kind of mental notes, and he listened to what I said, and he changed in 3 months that much. Look at the change in his face. And this was one of the attendees at that same lecture, changed from this particular state again in just about 2 months to this particular stage. So. And then this was my own experience. This was my face right when I met that patient. He was telling me about Sergey Brin, And then I went, this is before I went carnivore. This is a low carb diet. So dramatic change, about 12 years difference in my health. But again, it wasn't zero carb that had gone at that time. And then I didn't get to this guy to get his permission to put his image on the internet, but super big change in his face. So I did my best to conceal his identity. Hopefully I did a good enough job. But yeah, to your point is, I think there are periods where we would have been eating larger amounts of carbohydrates. And I think the answer, Paul, to the carbohydrates is going to be in the microbiome. The microbiome has an important role, and it will help us to tolerate carbohydrates. So my own experience when I drink milk that has carbohydrates in it because it has lactose, my blood sugars will spike. But if I drink that milk in a 50-50 mixture, the same quantity of milk, but I add kefir to it, no spike in my blood sugar. Isn't that interesting? So I consume it with my own homemade kefir, and I believe the carbohydrates are metabolized probably by my microbes with making up my gastrointestinal microbiome. So I regularly recommend to my clients to make sure that they are eating foods consistent with the practice of a lot of traditional people to eat fermented foods in their diet. So I think that explains a lot of the differences in some people's capacity to consume carbohydrates and not have as much of an impact. And those that come from a really bad poor metabolic health state, they're overweight, morbidly obese, lots of insulin resistance, and they eat just a little bit of carbohydrates and they're in trouble.
Yes.
Sets them off with cravings, and we can see that dramatic effect on their MRIs with cheating. So it's really interesting to me how people are where they are with their health has a lot to do with things that we still have to learn. And I think it's going to be that space of the microbiome.
Yeah, the microbiome is a fascinating thing. I released a podcast a couple of weeks prior to this one with Lucy Mailing that I would recommend anyone listening to this who's interested in the microbiome, go back and listen to. Lucy and I went into lots of detail about a ton of evidence suggesting that humans don't necessarily need fiber for a healthy gut microbiome. And we actually looked at one study where adding fiber to the gut made people worse when they had dysbiosis. It led to more inflammation, more markers of bowel and gut inflammation. And
I've seen that.
Yeah. And there was a study we looked at in that podcast in which they looked at the alpha diversity, which is a measure. It's an ecological measure of the diversity of the number of species in a given ecosystem. And the ecosystem they were looking at was the gut. And they gave people fiber, and the alpha diversity did not increase. But what did affect the alpha diversity positively was fermented foods. And I found that to be very interesting. So I completely agree with you here. And fermented foods are not something I've talked about a lot. I talk about fermented foods a little bit in my book, The Carnivore Code. And I think that traditionally a lot of fermented foods were used to detoxify plants, that you can ferment things like cabbage, which are brassica and are probably not super healthy for humans for a variety of reasons. I've spoken about this before. There are compounds in things like cabbage and kale and broccoli that are harmful for the thyroid or that affect iodine absorption. These are isothiocyanates. That's a topic for a previous podcast or for a future podcast. I definitely think Rhonda Patrick is way off base with her broccoli sprouts, guys. Throw away your broccoli sprouts. Regardless, if you ferment the cabbage, it's going to be less toxic for humans, and you're going to get the benefit of a fermented food. And so I'm really interested in this. When I did my gut testing with Longevity, they have a test called a gut bio or something. My alpha diversity was very high, but I'm interested to repeat it after incorporating some fermented foods in my diet recently. So I was trying to think, what could I do that's fermented? I know sauerkraut is an option. I'm not so much a fan of sauerkraut. I don't really like kimchi just because of the spices in there. I think can be harmful for the gut epithelium, the capsicum spices. But everybody's interested in apple cider vinegar. So I've been drinking a little bit of water kefir and apple cider vinegar recently. And I like it so far. I think that there are lots of ways to get some fermented food in the diet. And whether it's apple cider vinegar or water kefir, or if you tolerate dairy like you do, Sean, getting milk kefir would be good as well. But I agree with you. I think some fermented food is probably beneficial for the human gut. And I agree, the microbiome is this uncharted landscape. In the podcast I did with Lucy, at least half of the species in our gut are considered GI or gut dark matter. We don't even know what they are. When they tried to sequence mine, 65% were unknown. Only 35% of the species in my gut could they actually sequence. It was crazy.
Well, what's interesting to me is some of the studies that are showing that when you ferment vegetables, it eliminates over 99% of the lectins. So I'm like, what else is happening? What other beneficial changes are happening by these natural processes that happen from our allies in our gut? And maybe if you got a bad microbiome, what sort of bad things happen to food that shouldn't be happening? So it is a black box. We don't understand a lot of it, but God bless Peter Tiet. That guy, shout out to him. I love Peter, super smart. He kind of stays away from the microbiome because he thinks it's too dark and hard and esoteric. But Peter keeps craving stuff because I don't think he's making some choices. And so here's what I do. Peter ever listens to this podcast, and if you're somebody who's suffering cravings, I get my clients like this guy here. I'll just share his image. Can you see that image there?
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy's filled with visceral fat. So this is kind of typical of a lot of people that come in. He's thin on the outside. See that he doesn't have much subcutaneous fat and not much love handles. So this guy thought he was super healthy. I showed him images of good MRI scans of visceral fat, small amounts, and I showed him what bad ones look like. And then I showed him his, and the poor man literally passed out in front of me. He syncopized, almost gave me a heart attack because I thought he was having a heart attack. And so what I do with people like this is I can get rid of visceral fat, help them. Nature gets rid of it. It's not me. I just share with them natural strategies. What gets rid of it faster is not just cutting out carbohydrates, but also leveraging the microbiome. So getting them to eat those fermented foods helps eliminate those cravings that people just can't stop. I mean, the truth is you're less obese, you're more infected. And if you just thought about yourself being an infected human being with an infection, the wrong kind of microbes inside of your gut, I think that's far more of an enlightened view than to think you're fat or you're diseased, you're obese. We need to start telling people, exposing them to the microbiome and trying to eradicate the infection by healthier choices. Nature will get rid of it. Just live healthier. I love your content. What you're doing is trying to explore, how do we live? How should we, as Homo sapiens, optimally live? That's my space too. I'm a health and performance optimizing physician. And I got into that space by accident, researching chronic disease for the National Science Foundation. By the way, we got a grant from the National Science Foundation for all our research, getting rid of chronic disease. But what happened, Paul, when we got rid of chronic disease is two major things. People's appearance improved and their performance improved. So I think this is leverageable material that bodes well for the future of our company if we can get the influencers to understand that and start getting people to become more healthy. Because I know you got experience. I got experience. My clients tell me the same thing. I love what you do, Sean. I just can't get any of my friends and relatives to it because they're not interested in being healthy. So we've got to figure out how we leverage the fact that we can improve people's appearance and their performance and their quality of life to help them make the decisions that, hey, I really need to become optimally healthy. And this guy was really at a bad state. But I had to show that image to kind of share that concluding thought, about the role of fermented foods, because it really does when they're leveraged properly into your diet. And you don't need a lot. They're microbes, right? So I just tell people just even a quarter teaspoon of fermented foods, almost non-caloric in value, consumed throughout the day, just a little tiny bit, exposing you to those microbes will keep seeding good beneficial microbes that compete with the pathogenic ones that cause you to have all these cravings. And my clients' cravings go away very, very quickly. So that's a great tip. You're listening today to Paul's podcast. Start integrating fermented foods, kimchi and kefir, even blue cheese and yogurts. Make sure it's plain, unsweetened. Don't put sugary things into you, and you'll start to realize the benefits of fermented foods.
It's interesting that some fermented foods you could add water, kefir, or even apple cider vinegar with the mother to that list, with the mother to that list. But this came up, and I didn't share this on the podcast with Lucy, but this is fascinating to me, Sean, that a high linoleic diet, acid diet, so this is a polyunsaturated fat that I've railed against in the past, exacerbates metabolic responses and gut microbiota dysbiosis in obese rats with diabetes. So this is actually really interesting to me, the way that this could connect two dots. Again, this is in rats, but I think it will translate to humans as well. That linoleic acid, I think what we will find is that linoleic acid, polyunsaturated fats, specifically omega-6 polyunsaturated fats in excess, could worsen dysbiosis. So that if you have dysbiosis, could it be caused by seed oils? Could this be yet another thing that these excess seed oils are doing? If you guys are listening, you can go back and listen to the previous podcasts I've done with Tommy Wood or Peter from Hyperlipid about the way that seed oils will negatively affect the adipocytes and cause the adipocytes to grow and then secrete inflammatory mediators and probably cause visceral fat to grow. But what if they are also worsening dysbiosis in the gut and then potentially leading to cravings? Super fascinating thing.
Hey, yeah. I gotta tell you this one response, because linoleic acid, what you're saying, I'm gonna blow your mind from your formal training. I don't think you know this study, but February 9th edition, 2019 of the medical journal Science Advances, one of the most interesting studies I've ever seen. Get ready to be blown away, Paul. This study took 50 rats, 25 rats were control, 25 rats for the investigation group. They took feces from 50 humans and they put it into these rats. 25 normal humans' feces went into the control group, and 25 fecal samples from schizophrenics went into those rats. And those 25 rats that got the schizophrenic feces developed schizophrenic traits. Isn't that interesting? They started to behave schizophrenic. The investigators were blinded to who got what. They looked at the stool samples and they could identify schizophrenia by those particular strains that they found that were common in the schizophrenics. And here's what I want to talk to you about. Think about this. How many schizophrenic patients have we had in front of them and their diets? Processed foods like crazy. So the potential role of diet and the human microbiome into schizophrenia is shocking. So I hope you pull that study and think about all the processed foods contributing potentially, as you know, to depression, mood disorders, schizophrenia, in addition to chronic disease, arthritis, obesity, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and all the other profound manifestations of chronic disease just from poor dietary choices, especially processed foods.
It's crazy stuff. I mean, it's incredible. Just one more study. This one, you can see fish oil attenuates omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid induced dysbiosis. So they found fish oil improved it, but they say here clinically excessive omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids and inadequate omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acids, that is linoleic acid, excess linoleic acid has been associated with enhanced risks for developing ulcerative colitis and dysbiosis. So anyway, just wanted to connect those dots for people and kind of left those out of the podcast with Lucy. But yeah, transplanting the fecal microbiota from obese individuals, obese rats into skinny rats makes the skinny rats obese. the fact that you can put it in there from schizophrenic humans into mice and see changes is profound. And we're kind of left with this question, how the heck do we fix it? Well, I think that the answer is not as complex as many of us would be led to believe. It's really just get back to an ancestral lifestyle, right? It's eliminate the processed foods, eliminate the processed carbohydrates, eliminate the seed oils, and get a small amount of fermented foods a day. I think that's pretty ancestral. And get your vitamin D, because we know that real sunlight, real ultraviolet light is critical. Now, after this podcast, I'm actually going over to the studio to drop off some Heart and Soil supplements to Joe Rogan. And I'm probably going to send him this podcast because I really think that he'll enjoy it. But I was listening to him on his show the other day, and I'm going to mention this because he is doing a carnivore diet this month in January, Sean. And he was telling his guest the other day that when he eats pasta and bread, he feels horrible. And I thought, it's so fascinating, right? We see Joe Rogan is this perfect example. And the only reason I mentioned Joe is because he has a huge platform and millions of people are going to hear him say that. And millions of people are going to benefit from that. But I think it's so cool that he's doing an animal-based diet this month, doing carnivore, because he's already lost weight. He feels so much more clear. But it goes back to the point that we made at the beginning that certain types of carbohydrates appear to have very negative effects in humans. And the best thing that I can think of this myself is that the difference is that they're processed. And you mentioned rice, which is news to me, that somebody could eat rice over the weekend and see their visceral adipose tissue grow. That's striking. But I think that when we take grains and we grind them up into flour and we make that into pasta or we make that into bread, that could potentially be unknown for the human gut microbiome, unusual for us, and causing us major problems. Because as you and I both agree, it seems that fruit, honey, these are evolutionarily consistent sources of carbohydrates. They don't seem to cause the same problems. And you've had people eating fruit that don't see an increase in visceral adipose. But Joe goes and eats spaghetti, pasta, and bread, and he doesn't feel good. And I bet that if we looked at his visceral adipose, it would be growing with those carbohydrates. So the take-home message for people here is really just, even with these really clear visual illustrations, you can see seed oils, processed carbohydrates clearly contribute to problems. Animal foods are at the center of how we heal with the nutrients, especially nose to tail. And I think that we see that over and over and over.
I'll agree with you. I'll give you an example of my own. I used to have restless leg syndrome. I would kick my legs all night long. I had obstructive sleep apnea. I keep my wife awake with snoring and kicking my legs. So I go on a low carb, high fat diet. My restless leg syndrome goes away. But kind of early on, like within a few months after my restless leg syndrome went completely away, I ate this dinner my wife made, and I'm at nighttime and my leg is kicking. I'm like, oh, it's back. And I'm like, did you put something in that? She goes, well, you're going to laugh. I put a little honey in. I'm like, oh, carbohydrates that cause that. Now, I haven't even told my family this. They're going to see it. But I had to try it because I'm watching you, man. For the first time in 10 years, I went and took like 2 tablespoons of honey to see what had happened. No restless leg.
Oh, amazing.
How do I explain that? It must be the microbiome. My microbiome has changed because I have put so much into my gastrointestinal tract, my lifestyle, that now I think I can eat. Now, do I tell my clients that? No. I say, Hades, no, get off the carbs, build your microbiome, and then we'll return you to that. So initially get them started, on a lower carb diet, build up their microbiome, co-ingest it with fermented foods, and I think it makes a huge difference. So yeah, I'm super excited about what you're doing with Joe, and I hope he can get an MRI and look at his visceral fat, because I can tell Joe's got an inflamed face. I'm going to estimate, I'll put it on the record, at least the photograph I saw, I'm going to estimate Joe's got about 6 pounds of visceral fat. And if he wants to take me up on that challenge, worse than this guy.
I bet it's going to be less after this month on carnivore, though. It's going to be less.
It will be. You get the study quick so we can.
Yeah, so we got cut off there, but we're going to splice these together. I'm excited for Joe to get an MRI scan. He improves so much when he cuts out the junk food and those processed carbs. And I'm sure there's some seed oils in there with him, but I'm just excited because I think as Joe gets healthier, it's going to affect the lives of literally millions of people who see the benefits of this way of eating. let's wrap it up, Sean. There's so much we could talk about. We're going to have to do part 2 with more images, but let's talk to people about the benefits of sprinting. I've been doing 5x100 about twice a week the last few months, and I love it. I am super slow, but I love it. It's my favorite workout of the week. I did it yesterday, and you've got some images that really demonstrate the benefits of sprinting. So walk us through this, and then we'll wrap up the podcast.
Yeah. Does it show up here okay, Paul?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, so great. The other thing I'd recommend is throw on some BFR bands, blood flow restriction bands. We're studying them now in special ops in the military. I'm in the Army National Guard. So it's fantastic. It literally makes you sprint faster and it builds muscle. And I've got Olympic sprinters that don't know about it and they're missing the opportunity. So BFR's added to you. Watch how short a breath you get. It's interesting. We'll talk about it again. But here's the study. It's an N of 1. And guess who it is? It's the guy whose brain lesion cleared up. Okay. So this same client, 58 executive, has a high amount, 3 pounds of visceral fat still present in his abdomen. And this is a repeat scan. And I was disappointed that he still had persistence of visceral fat. And I was trying to understand how in the world can have. So a few things I asked right away. Are you drinking? Are you stressed out? Are you not sleeping? Are you cheating? Or do you have a chronic form of exercise going on? So those 5 things I will run by a client. And so the first 4 were negative. He did have chronic exercise. So what this guy was doing, I told him to not do, is to give himself a metabolic break in his body's physiology, was he was running 10 miles a day, 5 days a week. So that's 50 miles in total. So I finally convinced him to stop. And people, distance runners, get addicted to running just like they get addicted to bread and pasta. And so it's a hard thing. You try to get people to stop running, Paul, it's a hard thing. And I get attacked by vegans and I get attacked by distance runners. Guys, I'm just trying to help you. I'm just showing you what the science is, what I found empirically. So this guy stopped running, and in less than 2 months, look at this dude, man. The only thing that changed was he stopped running and he sprinted. He got jacked. His muscles grew. The MRI tech walked back to me and said, Sean, this guy is jacked. He's ripped now. You can't believe how much he's changed in 2 months. And I'm like, really? And I pull up the skin. I'm like, oh my God. So visceral fat went away from the adaptation of sprinting. So he just cut out jogging, stopped running that distance running. And for 2 months, that's all he did, sprinting. So Paul, if you were scanning yourself, I had to scan yourself before you started running, you'd see that. And go tell Joe, while you're on carnivore, Joe, start sprinting, and he would see the change in his visceral fat and also his muscularity. So it's that high intense exercise that we see. So this guy got a 6-pack, and he just looked fantastic for a 58-year-old guy from that single intervention.
You know what's funny, Sean, is that I used to be a distance runner. I used to run ultras, and Mark Sisson kind of had this idea of chronic cardio and how bad it is for you. And I'm glad I didn't keep doing it, because when I worked as a PA in cardiology, we would see people in the cardiology office with arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia who were long-term marathoners. And if you look at the data, I'd have to find a study here, but in the back of my mind, I know there's data to substantiate this that I've heard about, that marathoners have the same cardiovascular outcomes as people who are couch potatoes. So it's what we call a J-shaped curve. It's, if you over-exercise, you're just doing yourself a bunch of harm. And chronic cardio, in my opinion, Mark Sisson is totally right. It's harmful, right?
Yeah. Can you see this scan here?
Yeah.
This is a marathoner. This guy would run 8 to 10 marathons a year. Now, see a little sub-Q fat he had? He's 34 years old, thought he was super healthy, consumed a lot of carbohydrates. This is actually a friend of mine. I was like, man, I can tell you're inflamed and you got visceral fat. So he brought him in and scanned him. And look how much visceral fat this guy had. 34, was super lean looking, but completely filled with visceral fat. And the other interesting thing that he had present in, and hopefully I can show you this image at the same time. Let me just shut this down, is his heart. So in his pericardial scan, we show, let me pull this up here, and oh boy, I think there it is. Now, let's see. Does that show?
That's the whole folder, Sean, of all the images.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Let me
close that.
Yeah, let me see if I can click that and try one more time and see application. Well, I may not be able to get that image. For some reason, it's not loading, regrettably. But what the image would have shown was a large chunk of fat also around his heart. So between the visceral fat we imaged and the fat encasing his heart, he walked up to me really close. Let me just, I don't know if I'm screen sharing, but he got right in my face. I love this guy. And he goes, "I am going to be your most motivated client." I mean, he's a total alpha guy. And within 2 months, he lost 50% of his visceral fat in 2 months from the lifestyle changes he made. Sprinting, he just, he built a sauna in his house. He's doing all right. This guy was highly motivated, fasting, just a really great guy. So,
is this the image?
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
This one is not actually him, but this is a Vietnamese female, it was actually a fiance of my MRI tech. She came over and she was just loaded with pericardial fat around her heart from eating. She was thin in Vietnam, but then her microbiome changed when she got here in America, and that's what's happened. This Somali community in Minneapolis, they're thin in Somalia. But they come over to America and then they gain all this weight from eating the exact same food they eat in Somalia. They don't really integrate well, assimilate into their communities. They eat in their own restaurants, eat their own foods, but they get exposed to our microbes and then they start gaining weight. So the microbiome change. I mean, we're just constantly around these bad microbes. We're around good microbes, and that's what's going on. People just need to understand the constant influence and the exploitable benefit or the harm that comes from the microbiome if you're not actively thinking about how you live a better life.
I also wonder, it would be so interesting to follow these Somali refugees and these people, whether they're eating animal fat in Somalia and then eating seed oils in the US, because I suspect they're not getting seed oils in Somalia. They're eating real animal fat. It's my suspicion, and then changing. But let's wrap this one up. Sean, where can people find you? We'll do a part 2.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and Twitter, both on the handle at DRSEANOMARA at Dr. Sean O'Mara. And I also have a YouTube channel that I'm an N of one, a little small guy, one-man band on YouTube, Dr. Dr. Sean, SEAN, and then O''MARA on YouTube. And I have some interesting videos. I cover a lot of these kind of stuff and things that hopefully I can come back and be on your show again and talk about other interesting things. But if anybody is interested in following me, I'd be happy to share my content. My passion is trying to get as many people optimally healthy and performing optimally as much as I possibly can. Love it.
Thank you so much for coming on. I love the images. They're really incontrovertible. These are inarguable evidence, guys, that an animal-based diet reverses atherosclerosis, that it reverses insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. And then we have these examples of the fact that plant-based dieters can be full of visceral adipose also. And I love it. It's just this ancestral principle, this evolutionary principle. This is where we've come from. This is what a species-appropriate human diet is. This is how we should eat to be optimal. And your scans show it clearly. So thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to next time.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Paul. I really appreciate it. I had a great talk with you, man.
All right, you guys, thank you for listening to that podcast with Sean. I really believe that this technology, this use of MRI to visualize visceral fat is going to be a game changer. When people see what is going on in their bellies and can see on a daily basis how their decisions affect their visceral fat, then there's a striking improvement. I think that's how we create behavioral change. So I'm really excited and really excited about the awesome opportunities coming from this. Hopefully Sean and I will collaborate more in the future, but it's amazing. And hopefully we'll be able to offer this MRI scanning more widely and change things. But even the data that he presents in this podcast really bucks the norm and challenges the paradigm in a fundamental way. You can see that an animal-based diet absolutely reverses metabolic dysfunction, visceral fat reduced, and how it also is amazing for atherosclerosis, right? Even though it could be raising your LDL, as we know, LDL is not the cause of atherosclerosis. In the absence of metabolic dysfunction, we see atherosclerosis reversing in the brain. How freaking cool is that? Also want to thank my sponsors, heartandsoil.co. Check us out if you need desiccated organs in your life. This will really level up your performance. Got beef organs back in stock. Check out my favorites, Heart of the Warrior and Lifeblood. Give a shout out to Joovv, joovv.com/Paul. Use Paul there for discounts off their Generation 3.0 devices, new and improved. Super stoked about this stuff. It's amazing what red light can do for humans, and they are the pioneers. Sacredhunting.com/Paul for $250 off the hunting trip with Monsel. Belcampo.com and whiteoakpastures.com with the code CarnivoreMD for discounts on your meat. Regenerative agriculture is how we change the planet, you guys. Thank you for your support. Thanks for leaving me a review at Apple Podcasts. That's how we do it. Every month, I'll give away a free copy of the book to somebody who leaves a review. So thank you for your support with that. Without any more discussion, without any more, I was going to say bloviating, but I hope I'm not bloviating. Without any more, let's just say talking, I will end this podcast. Thank you all for listening. Signing off from the wilds of wilderness lands in Montana. This is your host, Paul Saladino. I will see you guys next week. Stay radical.